Cheat code. Support strategist. By clouds. My head in the clouds, not coming down. On AO3. Chapter 16. Potential. Majira walked into the staff room after school and made a beeline for the couch, face planting onto it with a groan. Eraser, never let me give you a hard time about your problem children again. Aizawa snorted, but didn't even look up from his paper he was grading. Serves you right. You have problem children this year? Yamada grinned as he looked up from his own paper. That must be fun. What are they like? Yamada lifted his head off the couch just enough to look him in the eye. You'll know soon enough. They've decided to use one of your students as an extra credit project. Nezu hid his smile behind his teacup, knowing full well exactly which student Majira was talking about. Of course, he hadn't had a chance to peek at the cameras for Class 1F just yet. He still had a school to run after all, but Midoriya and his friends Hatsume had so much chaotic potential, there was little chance that Majira was talking about anyone else. The only question now was which student they had chosen as their victim. I'm the homeroom teacher of 1C, Yamada said slowly. What would a couple support course students want with a Gen Ed kid? Majira sighed in exhaustion and sat up. They've decided that one of your kids is getting into the UA Hero course, and they're helping him do it. Can they even do that? Sniped asked. There's nothing in the rules against it, Mezu said cheerfully. It might have taken a few loopholes if they were teachers, but since they're students, then they simpler helping a friend, correct? Of course you know exactly who I'm talking about, Majira murmured. You do know this is your fault, right? If it was just Hatsume, I could handle it. I've had plenty of students like her in the past, but whatever she's combined with your prodigy... Wait, you have a prodigy? Yamada yelled, making Aizawa finally look up from his papers to cancel his quirk out. Not that Yamada noticed or even cared. You never take personal students. What even is this kid? A hellspawn, probably, Aizawa said. He has to be if he caught the rat's attention. Nezu simply smiled and let his faculty form their own opinions. Many of them already knew about Midoriya, and some had even met him. But the few who hadn't were all listening to the conversation with a mixture of curiosity and fear. All Might in particular looked vaguely terrified after the chat that Nezu had with him the other day. Not that the scolding had been undiversed, of course, but it meant that he was probably a bit more primed to be scared of Midoriya's potential and of Nezu's interest in him. Nezu was honestly more disappointed that All Might had forgotten about Midoriya after accidentally showing him his weakness than he was about the whole telling him not to be a hero thing. Nezu was still upset since heroism had apparently been Midoriya's lifelong dream, but the fact was that he was quirkless. As sad and as terrible as it was, Nezu couldn't pretend that Midoriya wouldn't be at least distinctly natural disadvantage, not just in combat, but in fashy popularity contest that defines the industry. It probably didn't matter which hero he asked. They probably would have all given him the same answer, so at least All Might had tried to be polite about it. Forgetting about the boy, however, was a much more serious offense. If Midoriya had secretly been a villain, or had taken All Might's advice badly, it could have been disastrous for all of Japan, even if All Might had been 100% certain that Midoriya would never use his weakness against him. The boy's knowledge of it would simply make an apparent target for the many villains that had a vendetta against the number one hero, but not communicating the encounter to anyone, not even Tsukashi. All Might had put not only himself, but also an innocent civilian in danger, which was idiotic, no matter what ranking he held. Nezu would have to keep an eye on him for a while. He was at UA to make sure he didn't encounter a student like that again. Which brought Nezu to his next concern, which was the heroics exercise he had observed that afternoon. It had been decent, but All Might obviously hadn't known when it was appropriate to stop a match to prevent undue harm. Teaching students combat was tricky, since they obviously didn't know yet how much force was appropriate for certain situations. Some tend to use too little, so afraid of causing harm that they might limit their own effectiveness, while others, like young Bakugo, tend to go overboard and use too much. It was a hard line to balance, especially for someone like All Might, who was practically capable of punching away all his problems. But it was one of the most important things that their students would learn over the course of their 3 years there, which meant that this was something that All Might would need to improve on sooner rather than later. Thankfully, the other teachers would be able to pick up the slack. Speaking of the other teachers, honestly, as much as I hate to admit a man is right, Kara darned. I think Aizawa might be right about this one. It's the green-haired one, right, Nezu? Midoriya? Nezu nodded and gestured for her to continue as the rest of the teachers leaned forward slightly in anticipation and curiosity. When I showed up to teach today, the kid was leading his class into some revenge plot against a hero student. Kara clicked her lips and smiled. It was delicious. Nezu didn't know whether to be proud, concerned, excited, or angry, so he settled on gathering more information before making that decision. Do you know which student? Kurama shrugged. Not quite sure. I do know he's a first year and apparently bullied the poor boy. I love their idea of revenge, though. The mischief little imps are going to do a bunch of subtle little things to make the kids miserable. So just look for the first year's encounters more than his fair share of daily frustrations, and you'll have your target. There were easy ways to find the child. If one just hacked into the records. If one just went, as undoubtedly would, Nezu would have the boy's name by the end of the night. And he was a bully, you say? Nezu, sir? All Might said hesitantly. Please tell me you're going to stop this, rather than joining in. All Might visibly gulped at a small, sharp smile Nezu gave him. Now, All Might, one of the goals of a teacher is to help one's students accomplish their goals. What kind of a teacher would I be if I didn't get Midoriya an assistance? But don't bother, Aizawa said. This kind of pettiness is up Nezu's alley, so at least he's going to be taking it out on a brat, rather than the whole humanity. The only thing he'll have to worry about is conspiracy theories trying to accuse the kid of being his secret love child or something. So, Yamada grinned. I get to meet the little listener? Which of my students has he adopted? I think Midoriya said his name was Shinso? Parload aside. He has a brainwashing quirk. Ah, a good choice. I approve, Nezu chirped. He remembered Shinso from the exam. Of course, it was a shame that he didn't get enough points, but despite his and Aizawa's best efforts, the school board had shot down every single one of the alternative exam ideas they have proposed, leaving Shinso in general education until he was able to prove himself during the sports festival. Brainwashing? Aizawa asked. It's an inherent quirk. I could see why Midoriya was drawn to it, Nezu chirped. Young Shinso can control people provided that they answer one of his questions. And of course, it's useless against robots, Aizawa murmured, and dragged his hand down his face. Please tell me your prodigy not to only focus on the kid's quirk. With a drawback like that, he'll have to be able to fight without it. Oh, you don't have to worry about that, Nezu dismissed. I do believe that Midoriya would be the last person to limit a person based on entirely their quirk. Oh, Kara asked. And why is that? There was a moment of tense silence before All Might, to Nezu's surprise, answered. Because he's quirkless. That explains it, Aizawa said after a moment. If he caught your attention, he obviously didn't let it limit him. Good. Now, let's see if the other problem child sees it the same way. There's a moment where Nezu talks about how it was stupid of All Might to, not remember this child whom he revealed his secret to. Which, yeah, I do believe it is stupid, right? I think it's super stupid. I also think it's stupid that he showed him he told him his weakness completely and didn't just tell him, oh yes, you see, get exhausted and I shrink down, right? That would have been so much better, right? Instead of revealing your whole damn secret, man's you could get killed. How are you not dead, right? It's like this top secret, and like you're revealing it out there in the world, right? So I agree with Nezu, right? Because in another story, that does happen. Midoriya does become a villain, and let's just say, All Might most definitely regrets telling Izuku his biggest, darkest secret, because it comes back to bite him in the lung. It actually comes back to stab him in the lung anyways. But yeah, I love that little detail there, because that story is from this author, so I love this. I also love this chapter in general, just the teachers talking about Midoriya and all the others. I also just love how All Might in this series seems to not, like, have the greatest opinion of Midoriya because of the Quirkless part. I mean, it's not as intel as the other fanfics that I've read of this author, but you could tell that he's still on the guard. And knowing how he is in the other fanfics, it sets a different picture, you know? I also love how Aizawa just admits, it's like, okay, yeah, alright. I'll see how this turns out, right? I love this. I really want to see Aizawa and Izuku interact. That is my one plea. Please, please. I want to see them interact. I need it. I desperately need it. As always, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds, and have a wonderful day or night. Join our community server. Link is in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.